Now I would like to invite Ms. Gülden Türktan, President of W20, to start the discussion. Thank you.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we are late 9 minutes. I have worked in a Swedish corporation, and that's not acceptable. Please have your seat, my dear panelists. They will have a microphone for me in half an hour, but you can start the discussions, please. Canan Hanım, buyurun. Madi. Yes, Kamil, I don't have resume reading. I don't have CV discussing. Everybody here is a very well-known, well-experienced. If you search the internet, you would know about them. I'm very glad that the room is full. I hope to have a lovely and live and good discussion for women, because we have a very good news. We are opening up the W20 in few days, but we have 90 minutes. We don't have a time counter, but I know that you are such good and experienced speakers. You will stick to the time. And if you may permit me, until they fix the microphone issue, we start with Jeff, and because we give the first chance to men. And we start with the first question with you. What do you think about W20? Is it a waste of time, or should we work on it until this Sunday with the launch? Or should we have a W20 within the 85% of the global economy, G20 countries? Should we work on it? Thank you.
So my first answer to that is I think it's a great initiative that Turkey has taken to establish the W20. I know there's been some disagreement or controversy about that. I think it's a great initiative and to be welcomed. And I would say that on two main grounds. One, if you look around this room, it's great that there are some men here. It's great that there's a man on the panel, but there's a majority of women in this room. I will say that the CEOs and managers and professional women who are here, they're the smart ones, because they are the ones that are going to be in control of the economy of tomorrow. And the W20 is a way of highlighting that, focusing on the issues, focusing on the work still to be done. So I think it's very welcome.
No. Few words about Canan. Gates Foundation, I didn't say that, I guess. We are very proud to have you here. We are also very proud to have worked in ABB for 20 years. We are very proud to have GE here, Canan. What about W20? What do you think about it?
First of all, thank you very much for the question. I think it's a very, very important question, and one that we should answer from the very beginning. Today we are here for B20, and B stands for business. So 85% of the world economy is doing business in a connected way, in an interconnected and interrelated way. But we know that in most of the B20 countries, the women participation to workforce is much less than it should be. It is still today, in the year 2015, an issue, especially for our country, where lots of our guests are experiencing. We are a modern, advanced, growing economy, but still participation of women in the workforce is below 30% or barely 30%. So we do represent a great economic power for the world to continue to grow. It was addressed by our Honorable Prime Minister and some of the other guests in the main auditorium this morning that the world is not growing anymore, not even at a 1% when you look at it in a whole. If we want to grow more, if we want to prosper more, if we want children to have better education and health care, mothers and women should work. The world economy cannot grow and run on one foot only. So from that point of view, as a businesswoman, I do believe it is very important to have a W20 warm-up in the B20, and I'm very much looking forward to deep diving on Sunday again together with yourself. Thank you very much for making this possible. I know you worked a lot.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you. Camille represents Accenture, a very well-known company as well. Camille, what do you say about W20? Did we need it or we could have done without it?
I think they weren't able to hear you. But first of all, thank you for the invitation to be here. It's a great privilege to be with all of you and share some views. On the W20, I think it's an obligation for those of us that are part of the B20, those of us that, whether we're men or women, we have an obligation to make sure that the population that holds up more than half the sky, and women hold up more than half the sky, we have an obligation to make sure that we're sponsoring, mentoring, bringing people along, not leaving them behind in this digital era. And as businesses, we're either going to be the disrupted or the disruptors, and we strongly believe that women are part of bringing great new ideas to what the future of the world, this digital world, will look like. So, when I think about women and the W20, I can't help but to link it to business. And it comes down to sponsoring women, making it possible for women to aspire to hold senior positions in government and in business in order for us to, at some point, have women representing half of senior roles and not just half of who holds up the sky in this world. Could you hear me? It was going to be hard to repeat all of that. So I think you understand my passion for this. You cannot separate the role and responsibility that business has in helping empower women, but it's also an individual responsibility. This responsibility can't be held just on policies and governments. It can't be held just on businesses, but it comes down to individuals. Each one of us having the responsibility to bring another woman up the ladder with us, giving her a vision, giving her the aspiration, and then sponsoring her so that she can achieve that aspiration. That's what I believe our role in terms of the W20 is as part of the B20.
Thank you.
Great.
Wendy, you have worked so hard about this issue all through the years, and I have seen you speak so many times. What do you say about W20? Is this a beginning or is this the end?
Okay, is this the beginning or is this the end, was the question. So, let me ask you a question though. Why are you here? And this also answers why we need this W20. I am here for one reason and one reason only. My grandson is already on the planet. I am worried about his future. I am worried about the future of humanity. And this is where the role of women is so important, because we bring so much diversity and difference to the policy making that is already there. let me share a few words of my story, because I'm not like these great women, or probably I'm not like you either, because I'm not running a multinational corporation. I don't have any qualifications. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I was a single parent when I set up my first business in my kitchen at home in poverty. Today I'm running 8 international companies and organizations, and I'm a representative of the European Economic and Social Committee working on policy. I do not have Thank you, but I want you to understand that I don't have any qualifications. And there are millions and billions of women like me who all have something to contribute. And we cannot no longer ignore them. We must ask them. They are willing to take the responsibility that Camille was talking about. Now, I'm in business. This is a business conference. Let me give you something to just spark your brain as to why we should be valuing women in business more. The greatest number of SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises, the backbone of any economy, the greatest number were created by women since the crisis. The greatest number of jobs created since the crisis have been by female-owned companies. And they are not just in hairdressing or education or health. They are in every single sector of the economy. And that is why we must concentrate on female-owned companies, because if we don't, we are missing a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. Additionally, women on boards, increase productivity, increase profitability, increase the share value, increase the value of the company, increase corporate social responsibility, every single business benefit that we need. We must be the change we want to see. Gandhi said it. You have to now ask, do you also want to be part of that change? I do, and as a result, my motto is, we must be the change we want to see, no excuses. So there are no excuses. We are going to make Women 20 top of the agenda, and we are going to make it work.
Thank you, Madi. If you are with us, we can do it.
I'm with you. I am with you.
Ayşegül Hanım, you are in a one of the very many good companies. So what do you say from your side about W20?
So it's a good question. I've been
coming from San Francisco to here to talk on the session.
Correct. It's interesting. I've been attending G20s many, many years now, and absolutely, certainly proud as a woman to be here as a part of the W20, not the usual B20 or the G20, which is a rarity. So first of all, my hats off to you as well as the whole executive committee who really made this a reality and this is happening. It's important. In the meantime, just like any of you, we've been sitting in big conference rooms, attending big G20s and listening to these directives as to what needs to happen, and then year and year and year on, the numbers don't really change. It's as sad as it is, the reality is that as wealthy as the world is getting in emerging markets particularly, there's still 865 million people, just alone, who are capable, educated, eligible to be able to work, but are not because they don't have access to work, as an example. 820 million of these people are actually from emerging markets. So the gap is big, and anybody, who else but G20 nations, the most developed and the biggest economies in the world, if they can hold a hand to these people, it's important, and we certainly have to support that. This is probably the negative approach, but just to give you positives, there's spectacular numbers. The world economy actually has to grow around $15 to $20 trillion in the coming 10 to 20 years in order to feed everybody, not just women, but the entire population. So one of the three directives, as you guys know, of the G20 and the B20 this year, which we're going to go to the leaders and say, is inclusiveness. And inclusiveness necessarily for youth and for women. So from this perspective, I think if we actually are able to bring the level of the women and include them to the labor force, just in mature markets, I'm not even talking about emerging, the GDP will grow by 5 to 9% in mature markets. And in emerging markets, we're talking about over 30. So I looked at the number of Egypt, close to the region here. It will be 30% growth because right now their participation to work is less than 20. Similar in Turkey, as you know, we've been in the upper 20s. I think now it's around 30s, what have you. So there's huge way to go. But again, it's not just us in this room, women, talking to ourselves, and hats off to the guys who came here, thank you. But we got big work to do, and that's gonna take effort from private companies like ours, public, as well as the NGOs. And only then, if these three parties can come together and propose great solutions, which I hope we will talk about, then I'm hoping that we can empower the women, give them the access, really educate them, and then make the business opportunities that they can get ahead. So we got tons of business and work to do to get there, but we're certainly dedicated. So this is a great step forward. Thanks.
Thank you. I think you have to encourage our speakers here and then. An American educated economist, and when I studied macroeconomic growth, is that easy? I mean, can we really grow? And what are you doing? That is, women are now expected to grow the economy. From the simple family, I can see that if man works and if he doesn't get a 10%, 25% raise every year, the welfare is not going better. But if woman is also starting working, or young woman in the family is working, apparently the income of the household is increasing, very simple, and the total income of the country is increasing. So we have an expectation from women to bring value add to the macroeconomy. That's a very simple arithmetical, good expectation, and it is valid for the family, it's valid for the macroeconomy. But I know that you have great efforts in your own areas. What have you done? What are you doing? For example, I was in New York in March this year, and I have been to very many Broadway shows, as much as I could afford during the time I studied there. And the best show I have ever been has been Gates Foundation and then Clinton Foundation woman show, no ceilings. What are you doing in your, I mean, I have been there, I know, but let's make this room a little more enlightened about your success and about your commitment to these issues.
Well, thanks very much. First of all, we would be very hesitant to claim success. We would say we're focusing hard, we're learning a lot as we go along, but we've still got a long way to go. And the observation that I'd make, Gates Foundation pays out about $5 billion a year, predominantly on our international programs. Most of those are to do with health, including maternal and child and reproductive health. We have a big emphasis on, and we think that's one of the basic building blocks of women's empowerment, obviously. We concentrate on the poorest communities in the poorest countries, so somewhat different from some of the audience today. Let me just make a couple of quick points. One, what we have found is if we are not deliberate about gender in our health programs, our agriculture programs, our finance programs, A, we are not as successful as we should be, as Madhusharma was saying, and B, overall, we just miss a big part of the picture. So what we've been trying to do, very much pushed by Melinda Gates, is in each of those have a very deliberate lens that's saying, what is this doing about women, and particularly about women with fewer privileges or less education or less access to the system. And I'll just mention a couple of examples. One, and I think it's been talked about here, it'll be talked about further in the G20, the whole issue of financial access of women. There are 2 billion people in the world who are unbanked in rough terms. The majority of those are women. If you can find ways, cost-effective ways, and this is where we need the private sector, to allow women access, autonomous access to financial services, to their own bank accounts, to mobile payment systems, you give them an enormously important economic tool, which is even more vital for women who may be in farms, in rural areas, or for cultural or other reasons, cannot go alone to a bank, cannot have their own private control, may have various sorts of constraints. So we've got a big focus on financial inclusion, the use of technology to increase women's access. That's one quick example. Another quick one, our second biggest program is on smallholder agriculture, particularly in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. The correct pronoun for the majority of small farmers in Sub-Saharan Africa, or productive small farmers, is she. You will normally see he, but it's actually she. So a big part of what we do is try to say, what is it that is common to all farmers, whatever they're trying to do, in what they need, in market access, inputs, technology, knowledge, and what are the particular things that can lead women farmers to transform the situation for their families. And what we know, and this is my last word, Madam Chairman, what we know from a lot of economic studies, including by my old institution, the World Bank, is if you put income into the hands of women, it tends to go on families, on productive investment in the household, and on expansion of the family's capability. If you put that same income into the hands of men, it's kind of variable. Yeah. So we very much want, especially with rural women, to try and give that opportunity for the increase and the opportunity to be in their own hands. So that's an example of where we're trying to make a difference.
Where is Sanem? Sanem, you should make Jeff an honorary member to our organization. Because this is such an important issue. I said it yesterday to the labor ministers. The money in the hands of women is cost-saving, sustainable, risk-averse, and is there, after you look at it 5 years, it has grown. Whereas risk-taking, which is a male talent, creates some loss in the money. And one of the favorite things that I like to say about this crisis, the world crisis, which we read research. I have been the chair of Kagidar, and 4 years I read who's writing what about women, what's happening, but you try to explain it to an audience, and the audience becomes, oh, she's reciting the research. But the research is summarized. If Lehman Brothers was a big financial institution, with due respect, but they marked the beginning of the crisis for the world with their collapse. And the research says, if Lehman Brothers was called Lehman Brothers and Sisters, we would have survived this crisis. So that summarizes research that Jeff has referred, and I think is very, very important point. What do you say in this respect? What do you do in GE for women?
How much time do we have? 2 hours. No, no, it was a joke. Like, I have a lot to say on the topic.
And let's leave room for questions.
I will.
Recap what we have said.
I will. Okay. So, the General Electric company has been working with women initiatives that is a grassroots start. It's not something that the company imposes, but it is what the individuals within the company has started 17 years ago. And the reason we have started the GE Women's Network initiatives is that we pride ourselves in being a company that respects diversity, not only in gender, but in each way and form. And of course, gender diversity is an important part of it. We observed that we hire more or less, even in technology and in heavy manufacturing, equal numbers of women at entry level. But when years pass and when we come to the top level, the executive level, there is maybe 10%, if even that, of women who have survived the journey. And so we said that we're going to create the awareness, the mentoring, the coaching, the support system within the company, whether you are male or female, to make sure that we have the same diversity at the very top of our company. Going back to the answer of your first question, why is an initiative like Women 20 is very important, or why a company level diversity initiative is very important, there are three things. One is this has, as you very eloquently put it, at macroeconomic level, an economic impact on the growth of a nation's economy and eventually the global economy. The second one is, as it has been touched upon also, social implications. Women who start earning money, who have economic dependence, spend it first on their children and education, and then on healthcare, and this contributes to creating more sustainability of growth and wealth in the society. But number three is something that's very important. It means more profits for companies. If you are a company which has 40, 60, 60, 40, 55, 45% gender diversity at its decision making in its board, in its executive committee, in its top executives, according to multiple studies, and the one I love is by McKinsey in 2012, and they keep issuing new versions every year, that there is an 11% more profit, which is what we are working for. And what you do with that profit is totally up to you. In GE, we invest more profit into more innovation, and we invested into being present, creating jobs in more countries around the world. And proudly, we are now fully operational in over 190 countries in the world, creating jobs and profits to make it sustainable. So how do we do that? There are, I think, 4 values. One of them is meritocracy and positive discrimination. As we are a culture of meritocracy, and if there is a job opening, and if there are candidates of the same caliber, proudly we, where necessary, where we do not have that balance, favor women. The second one is flexibility. We try to, and now with Generation Y coming into the workforce, the millennials coming into workforce, it's another diversity. You need to also be able to work with the gender gap. For women, we have many programs across all nations that favor flexibility in working conditions, in working hours, in taking your annual leave, in taking time off with a job guarantee, in being supported through maternity, all the social barriers that hinder women from staying in the workforce and going up the ladder. And And the third one is what I call the gentle push. It is the coaching and the mentoring that our male leaders as well as our female leaders give to women who are in need of that. We do tend to sit in the back of the room, think about beautiful things, not voice it up unless we are poked. We tend to be more perfectionist. We tend to, when someone says, I think Canan should promote to this level, I say, oh, I don't think I'm ready. Do you think I have the right credentials? But a man doesn't think about that. Say, it was about time, is what they say. So it's regardless of the capabilities being there, and if somebody doesn't open the door for you, if somebody doesn't push behind your back, it is easier for women talent to get lost somewhere in mid-career. So this is what we are trying to do, and serious, genuine passion and conviction and commitment of our senior leadership. I think for those of you who follow press, who follow industrial companies or General Electric, we have made a great announcement 2 days ago. Beth Comstock, one of my mentors and one of my ideals, has been with the company for a very long time, has been announced Senior Vice President of the General Electric company. First time ever in 200 years, a female, well-deserved, wonderful person. Start following her up in Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn. She writes great stories in LinkedIn. Beth Comstock has become the first Senior Vice President of GE. So something must be working. We still have a way to go, and it needs to be sustained and protected, but we believe in it. Here I am, and here is Beth Comstock, and we shall have more and continue to inspire others.
You have your HR manager here for the applications? Thank you. Camille, what are you doing? What is on the agenda?
It's an interesting question, and I'll let the audience know that we had the good fortune of being able to think about these questions ahead of time. So I think we've all reflected a bit on what we wanted to share. I think having programs that support women's attraction, retention, and development is the entry ticket to being in business today. Okay, so these aren't things that we do to become world-class companies. It's an entry ticket to actually being in business. So we need to change our mindset a bit. Okay, so that's one. And I see a lot of women in this room, and I want you to think about that as you choose your employers or as you build your own company. The entry ticket to being in business is to make sure you are a company that is attractive to women. And then once you have them, you develop them, and you retain them, and you position them in places of power so that more women will join your company. Okay, so that's the entry ticket. So let's talk a little bit about Accenture. It's my opportunity to brag a bit. I do think it makes a difference when you have senior women at the top. And I'm very proud that we have over 30% of our external directors made up of women, and very strong women who come from very strong backgrounds and successful careers in their past. Companies like JP Morgan and Citigroup, et cetera. So having strong vocal women that sit on a board is a powerful catalyst for encouraging a CEO to focus on topics around diversity. And again, when we talk about diversity, gender is part of it, but it's this holistic definition. Because when you're in business, it's not the nice thing to do to focus on women's issues. It's actually the capitalist thing to do, because women bring a different perspective and idea to every solution, and that's why it's important to have women at the table. And I want us to remember that. It's not because you have to meet a quota, although sometimes you need a little bit of a nudge for some companies to do the right thing. It's more about women bring different ideas, and different ideas It's all about innovation. Innovation is about winning in the marketplace. Okay, so that being said, what I would say at Accenture, we do three things very well. One is we help women identify what their strengths are. So instead of taking your weaknesses and trying to get those to average, I want to make your weaknesses irrelevant. And I want your strengths to go to the next level. So you identify your strengths and you take your strengths to the next level each and every day. The second thing is every woman should have a board of directors. Just like a company has a board, every woman and man, I believe, should have a board. And a board is made up of people that can give you unbiased advice, coaching, nudging at times. And these people should have really no vested interest in what your decision is on their own outcome, right? So you want independent people on your board, just like corporate boards. You need independent directors. So for example, my board includes members of my family. It includes professors from many, many decades ago. It also includes people that work for me. So I respect the judgment of people at different levels, and I want their input. But remember, this is just seeking input, and it's a sounding board. And I call it a board of directors. But the third thing, which I actually think is what really moves the needle on gender in the workplace, is this word sponsorship. And there's a distinct difference between sponsorship and mentorship. Sponsorship is having someone who has sharp elbows at a decision-making table who will make room for you. This is someone who knows your strengths, they know your weaknesses, and they believe that their reputation is worthy of being attached to yours. So it's someone with those sharp elbows which will help you move up the career ladder. Everybody should have sponsors, and those sponsors are within your company. Again, whether you're a man or a woman, but it's especially critical for women. It's not something intuitive that we think about, but sponsorship is key, and it doesn't have to come from another woman. It can be a man, but you need to think about who can really impact the decision. So in Beth's case, I guarantee you that Beth has sponsors that are men and women, not just women. Because if you just have women sponsors, you're going to limit your own career trajectory. So those are the three things I think we do really well. I could go on, and I'd love to, but I want to be respectful of the time. I would also, the young women that I see in this room, I hope those are nuggets of advice you take back for yourself, but also for your companies. And if you remember nothing else, remember that you also have the obligation to be a sponsor. Who calls you a sponsor? Because we all have that obligation.
Thank you. I have two microphones. Madi, what are you doing? We know that you have done great things, but what are you doing now for women? And you have NGOs as well, not only companies. So let's hear it from you.
I can't do anything. I'm just an individual person. It's so difficult for an individual, you know, with no qualifications, not respected by anybody, to do anything. Or I can say, I'm in a very privileged position. I have a responsibility, and I'm going to take up that challenge. And that's what I've done. I know that I have access to policymakers, and I have a voice, and a very strong voice, and I have passion and energy which I can commit for those women who are not as fortunate as myself. And that's what I've tried to do on two fronts. On the first front, on policy, because I'm involved in policy making. So I'm doing what Jeffrey's doing. And Jeffrey picked up the most important point. How is the money being disseminated? 315 billion euros in the European Union. How is it spent? Do you know there is no gender analysis whatsoever? That's got to be illegal. You cannot hand out money without looking how it is disseminated. We have development funds that go. We have projects that are written and people apply for these projects, and you know we don't look at the analysis of who designed the project, how many women were on that project. When the project was evaluated, how many women were on the evaluation panel? How many women did it actually affect at the end? Unless we look at the full process, the money will always be handed out with a bias. So I'm lobbying for that so that we have a clear picture of what's happening. I'm also lobbying and writing articles, because I'm also a freelance journalist, on women and women's issues around the world. I'm also making myself very unpopular by every single time there's an all-male panel taking a picture of it and putting it on Twitter. Now, you have the same power, because in Europe, the Director General for IT technology now refuses to sit on an all-male panel. And we have had this as a lobby campaign for the last couple of months. And so an individual can start to make a difference. Now I want to ask you one other thing, which is one of the things that we're doing within my company, and one of the things that you can do. Do not ask for a CV. A CV does not mean you are going to get the right employee. You are judging on what is written on a piece of paper instead of judging on what that individual can bring to your company. So we make profit, exactly the same as Jana said. Profit is the most important thing you can have, because then you have a choice. And my choice is to use my profit to set up social enterprises which help women and which help young people, and set up NGOs which support women in domestic violence and the empowerment of women. But one of the next projects that we're doing is going to set up a recruitment agency based on no CVs. Now, those of you who are CEOs, those of you who have a responsibility for employing people, ask why you need a CV. And I know you'll tell me. Oh, yeah, but Maddie, you know we need the CV because the HR director has to decide. We know we need qualifications for this job. Do you really need qualifications for that job? Or is it better to have a person who has a passion? Somebody who's always wanted to work for Accenture, or always wanted to work for GE. Let me finish with this analogy. If I give you €1 and you give me €1, we each have €1. If I give you one idea and you give me one idea, we each have 2 ideas. There are 7 billion people on the planet. If each person was given the opportunity to turn one idea into an action, we could alleviate poverty. We could reduce climate change. We could make sure that nobody goes hungry. We have to turn those ideas into action. And those ideas come from the people. They don't come from the politicians. So my plea to you is to ask you to empower not just women, but especially young people, to turn their ideas into an action so that we can have a sustainable world.
Thank you. And what do we do at Intel, Ayşegül Hanım? We have a lot of innovations, we have a lot of woman touches. What do we do?
Let me start with a story, if I can. I like to talk about numbers, as you guys have gathered. I'm a computer person, so we can't help that. And I think sharing stories and the outcomes of the things that we do is much more valuable than the stuff we do. So when I used to cover Africa and Middle East before the job that I do today, which is a global job, we ran this entrepreneurship program and PC education combined together. This is some years ago. And I went out to, they said, well, you have to come here. And, you know, I go to South Africa every 2 months and what have you. And they said, you do have to come meet these people. I said, okay, no problem. So I go there. This was the inauguration of our program over there. This is in Tembisa. And for those of you who've been to South Africa, Tembisa is a township a little bit more disadvantaged compared to Soweto and the other townships that there is. And it's over 1 million people who live there, but at the moment, at the time that I went, there were no PCs, no access, no internet, what have you. So we went there, we opened up this little center and worked together with a bunch of other companies, rolled out the training. Then I go back, I think this is like 4 months later or what have you, and I came back because now it's time to hand out the certificates. And we're handing out the certificates, and there's a woman sitting at the very front. She's a big woman, but incredibly quiet. And there's probably like 3 or 5 women among the entire audience of probably 150 people. And they're all sitting quietly, and this is very South African, right? And they're quiet usually, it's a part of their culture. So after we did all the speeches and shook everybody's hand, gave out the certificates, I couldn't help it as a woman and walked out and started having a conversation with this lady. And what she told me that day, I'll never forget in my life. She told me that before the training, there was one internet cafe in the entire 1 million population township. It was run by a guy. After her training and the whole entrepreneurship thinking, what have you, she decided to take it over. She took it over, and all the setup where the kids would come in and they would play and what have you with the computers, she turned it into a training room. She actually used the content that was provided by companies like us and then trained people how to use PCs. And then she told me that in the past 2 months that she's been trained and the whole place has been up and running, people started getting jobs in the town of Johannesburg. And it's all men, by the way. So, speaking of teaching somebody how to fish instead of giving them fish is a fantastic example of this woman who felt so passionate, responsible, did something for her community, and helped people to get jobs that were really valuable outside. Another little example I will share with you is a project we did some years ago in Turkey. And we called it Techno Woman Project, and it was together with the Ministry of Education at the time and another NGO. And what happened, this was the very first, I'll never forget, because, to this day, in every forum, I'll use this example. We went after a woman who was probably in their late 20s, early 30s, who had kids. They actually were educated, but it was that time of their life that they stopped working because they wanted to have kids, and they wanted to take care of their kids, but they couldn't go back to work because they stopped working for that long period of time. So we particularly targeted them, and we gave them a training for 4 weeks about how to use computers, how to build an image of themselves, a social website, a resume, how to present, how to do interviews, what have you. And out of the 20 people, again, of course I go back, I always want to know, what are they doing? And we sit together and have this conversation. Out of the 20, 7 of them found jobs right away, and actually one of them, by implementing what she has learned, opened up her husband's restaurant. That was a corner little restaurant that made mante for the Turks dumpling place onto the internet, and they actually quadrupled their sales right away. So again, another way to see if given the opportunity and the empowerment or the training, women are incredibly able, innovative, and will find a way to persevere for their family, for themselves, for their community. So we have programs, and as I mentioned, in the time that I used to run emerging markets, it's all this grassroots level activities that we push technology to educate us as well as empower women to the best of our abilities. And one of the programs that we run, again, is a program called She Will Connect, where we're running towards connecting 5 million women, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and different parts of the emerging markets, to connect them, how to use PCs, how to use internet, so that they do have a voice, so that they can be a part of that global economy that is being shaped today. At a total different level, and before I jump there, I used to run the diversity group in EMEA that I used to belong to. At the time, I always found it very interesting to say I was the only women director who actually had women country managers. I had 2 of them under me. No other director, who were, by the way, all men, had no women country managers at the time. And I always used to joke, this is not a coincidence. This is not a coincidence. So have I learned it wasn't when I moved out to our headquarters. And then over there, what we do today is we sit around. It's you know, the more we get together, unity is power. And this is what you learn as women, you know, over the years. We sit together as all global vice presidents, and we still can fit a table, right? So we have way to go, just like any other company. I hope we can fit in a big room in the future. And we have monthly meetings to look at our list of up-and-coming women. Who are we going to promote? How are we going to help them? How do we sponsor them? How do we hold their hand? And actually, we worked together with our CEO and rolled out a diversity initiative that was announced earlier part of the year that our corporation has pledged $300 million actually to make sure that work-labor parity was achieved within our own company. And so far, we're doing very well. We're at 43% of all hires are actually diverse hires, most of them women and other underrepresented minorities. So as that's working, I think the big learning over there is this is not enough. It is more also that the purchases that our corporation needs to do, up to $1 billion at least, needs to happen from the diverse businesses, diverse-owned businesses that we're going to spend, whatever spend our company is doing. So it has to be a grassroots effort across the board, be it me as a woman, myself, supporting, mentoring, pulling up the woman as best as I can, who I know has the potential, and then working grassroots in my own community. How do I enable, you know, for me, I'm Turkish, how do I help the Turkish woman or the Middle Eastern woman or the regional women? And then up there, it is, you know, our global companies' women, and how are we gonna make them go up? So it's a lot of, I think, unity, voice, making sure that you influence the right people, and then once you're one force and you get together, many, many doors do open. So it's turning these into opportunities for the better of the women is the most important thing.
Thank you, Ayşegül. Now we have a W20turkey.org site. I'm sure you have read it all, and you have, including the audience, my panelists have studied it very perfectly. What we have done there is we have studied all the international organizations. Maybe I will not be able to cite them all, but UN Women, World Bank, IMF, ILO, European Union, OECD, all these organizations with a lot of reports and declarations have always said nice things about women, have always wanted, accepted gender diversity, gender inclusiveness. They have never said something wrong about women. I have met a lot of businessmen, and they are usually men, you know, and I have never seen a man say, oh, we don't want any woman in our board. They explained some things. There was nobody at that time, that's why we give this picture to Madi, that we are all male, but we have very good intentions. We believe that women make good things, and I have never seen man complaining about woman unless it's his wife. But in general, they say always nice things and always good things, especially this literature that we have studied is saying something very important to me about women. All the international literature, it says that woman is strengthening recovery and lifting potential of the economy. They believe that woman strengthens the lifting potential of the economy. They say women's participation into economy is buttressing sustainability. And it also says that it's strengthening the resilience that we have. Women are resilient, so we also resilient in, we are strengthening the resilience of the economy. So a lot of expectations about women. Now in front of us in W20, we have, to put it into simple, very scratching words or a caricature, there are women who are not educated, have access to nothing, rural areas. She doesn't have a school to go. So what can we do with her? Rural woman, she wants to produce, but has no financial means to produce. We have a woman who cannot be employed, is looking for a job, but she cannot be employed in the cities or in the rural areas. We have women who are working, but no social security, no proper pay, no proper background. We have women in the employment, in the workforce, doing very well, but they don't have the right chances within some organizations. And we have women CEOs, we have women at the boards, we have women in the governments. So in W20, which woman, I must say this before that, they said, we have decided that W20 is formed, but we will have a declaration. In that declaration, you will have a paragraph, not 25 pages about women. You will only have a paragraph about women. So say what we can do about women. And the turning point has been the earlier declaration, which is Brisbane Declaration of Australia's presidency, which said something very remarkable and a turning point for women's studies, which is 25 by 25. Until year 2025, the difference between men and women in the economy is going to decrease 25% in every respective country. So we have this target, that's our starting point. And now what we should say, the number of women in the boards, the CEOs, etc., is very little, but their impact and role model is huge. But the rural woman is too many, and the difference you can create there, maybe you know it better, but the difference you can create there with little money, little effort is huge. So what do you recommend that we put in our final declaration? I would have the first word from you.
Say two things. One, I think the W20 should be absolutely tough-minded on the issue of equality of opportunity and equality of income, of pay. And you know, it seems completely obvious in many of our countries. There are too many places where de facto it doesn't happen, and even socially it's not the established norm. So I think a very clear statement about equal pay for equal work, equal opportunity, moving towards equal opportunity and overcoming the barriers is just a very important thing. I think that to go back to your point about women in much more disadvantaged situations, I think we do need a commitment in the W20 to overcome the barriers that are not talked about in the 25 by 25. The 25 by 25 is about participation in the formal economy, participation in the labor force, getting into jobs in factories run by GE or whatever. I think we need to have, and Intel indeed, we need to have a commitment that women who are in some cases in family farms, self-employment, small entrepreneurship, are given equivalent opportunities in opening out. I happen to think one of those is provided by technology and access to financial services. There are obviously other vectors for that as well. So I think that focus is a second very important thing. I think the third thing, look, I'm the father of daughters and the partner of a very, very senior and accomplished woman. I think it is important that we look at who's at the top and we ask questions about why so many of them are men and why many more of them couldn't be women. So it's not because I think the W20 should have a very elitist focus. I think it's where leadership leads, the bulk of women and the bulk of people will follow. So I think as a third thing, that insistence on asking tough questions about panels, about boards, about CEO slots is really important.
That we are done. We can close the session.
Okay.
No, Jana, yes.
Three things I want to say, and the first one is a story. How can a big industrial giant like GE can change lives of young high school graduate girls in rural Bangladesh? When I had a global job with GE, one of the many, and I was working in healthcare where you create these beautiful stories, and one of the things was I was working on increasing the penetration of a new invention. It's a pocket size, an iPhone size ultrasound, which really gives capability to doctors, healthcare providers around the world to actually see what's going on inside the body. And it is chargeable. You carry it in your pocket, very easy. You take technology to the very rural setting. So when you say, actually, let me take a look, you can look inside. So if there's an accident in a rural village and a boy has fallen down and is unconscious and you don't know if there is internal bleeding or not, it costs less than $10,000, very affordable. You take it out of your pocket, you put it on, and you see what you need to do. So we were testing how can this change issues in the communities. How can it make it more sustainable healthcare? And one of the things is I had the good fortune of working with the Grameen Foundation of Mohammed Yunus in Bangladesh. We, together with him, with his team's help, we copy-pasted his microcredit model to healthcare. We chose rural clinics, which are like little huts, where there are no nurses, no doctors, no healthcare providers, and we wanted to have this ultrasound to tell you normal, abnormal in pregnancy. There is a very high baby death at birth, and there is a very high young mother death just because technology is not available. So we said we could use this, we could teach this to young women who don't have a job or a profession, how to use this, not to make a diagnosis or a treatment, but just to say the baby is not in the right direction. I can measure the circumference of the head 3 months ago and now. If the head is not growing, something is wrong. Actually, everybody can give birth at home by themselves. It's a very natural process. Only 1% results in death. And it's important to find that 1%, then you can send it to the hospital. So we used this and we educated high school girls. We gave them finance from the Grameen Bank and we sent them back to their villages to act as the ultrasound assistants and to follow up pregnancies. And this has showed me that technology invented somewhere in Schenectady, upstate New York, can change the lives of women, babies, and young girls who need a job. So one thing to put in that declaration is big nations, big corporations, big governments can make a difference with very little attention. Number two that I would like to put in that declaration, if possible, is that it should not be considered an imperative, a choice to bring equality to genders in access to jobs, access to education, and access to healthcare. It should be mandatory. It is not nice to have 25% increase in women participation to workforce in the next 10 years. It's a shame. It should be mandatory to have the same thing available today. So if you change it from nice to have, we could grow, we could be better with women, to it's a must, it's a law, it's a rule, it's a regulation, it's going to happen faster. So I would like to see with Women 20, maybe not this year, but eventually, the mandates for helping women have their rightful place in the community become more mandatory than nice to have. And number three is, I think we should use all these big organizations you talked about and the data that's available to pull it together in one more forceful database to really show the economic value impact of women. It is not there. It's one study and another study and another study. They do not add up because it is men who listen to it most of the time, and they don't really feel the loss that they have today by not having all of us working with them. So that's what I want to say.
So now you're a task force leader by obligation. Finish. Thank you. Camille, what should, I mean, your job is this, so tell us what we should write there.
These are very tough acts to follow. I would echo what both of my panelists have said. I look at the world through the lens of outcomes. So what I would really like to see in the declaration is, what are the outcomes we're seeking, rather than what activities and processes we think need to be part of the declaration. And if I think about outcomes, and the words are crisp and short, the first would be access, right? We want to make sure that we give equal access to men and women for livelihood. And that includes microfinance. That includes figuring out 50% of the world that doesn't have access to banking. How are they going to have their own accounts? But beyond that, how are they going to build businesses? So access. And this is also relevant for men, by the way. This goes for men and women. But I think we have an obligation to think about how do we provide access for women to have livelihood. The second thing I would say is this point of sponsorship. What is the obligation that every business and government entity has to providing sponsorship to pull women up that ladder of success? And the third, I would use this word, aspiration. I think we need to help young girls earlier in their lives understand what this word, this very ambiguous word, aspiration means. And again, it's relevant for men, but for me, it's even more important for young girls to aspire to be astronauts and scientists and technologists. It doesn't mean that their aspiration is any less valuable if they want to be teachers or chefs. But the world needs more women aspiring for top positions in global companies. And the world is changing so quickly. I don't need to tell you this. The pace of change
is at a neck break pace. I look at China 15 years ago versus today. I had the good fortune of working and living in China 15 years ago. And now when I go to Shanghai, I don't recognize the city as being the same. The way we do business is different. The world is changing at an accelerated pace that none of us as businesses could have even predicted. So think about sponsorship and access for every woman. I'd love to see those words. Those are outcomes that we seek. We seek those outcomes for women. And at the end of the day, what that gives us is livelihood. So at one level, you're giving a group of women simply livelihood. And that's an important thing. So getting the microfinancing they need to start the home yarn blanket making business that they aspire to have. That's at one level. At another level, I need to give access and sponsorship for women coming out of universities who want to be the future CEOs, and that they know that it's okay to share their aspirations. We're good at a lot of things, but we're not good at mind reading yet. And women do not articulate their aspirations as often as they should, as loudly as they should, and perhaps they're not even aware of what their aspirations should be. So we, as businesses, as part of the B20, have an obligation to make sure every woman knows that their aspiration is limitless. You can do anything that you want, and that there are sponsors that will help you achieve that. So there are different categories, and I think the audience obviously knows this. You're a sophisticated group. We don't want to leave people behind, but we also want to take the people that are part of the economy today and accelerate their success. I want the next generation of women to achieve far more than I've achieved, and I want them to sponsor other women up the ladder of success. We have an obligation to do that. I use this word a lot. Access and sponsorship, though, would be the words that I would love to see used in the final declaration.
Thank you. There's no space left in the paragraph. So excuse me.
They are telling us you can have.
That's it. Well, they filled it.
No, we will survive.
Okay, excuse the ignorance then. You know I'm not educated. But the word equity and equality means equal rights. I want one thing. I want 50% of the voting rights. I want to have equal rights on the number of votes. So the number of women get the same number of votes to the number of men. If there are 2 men on a panel and 1 woman, then that woman gets 2 votes. In every single public sector domain and decision-making process. And if we don't, we will never, ever have equality. And I'm serious. And I will give you an example. The European Economic and Social Committee, of which I'm a member, has 207 opinions that go through the committee on average a year. 46,000 votes were cast by men, and 13,000 votes were cast by women. This is happening in every single EU institution. It means we cannot get the maternity pay directive through. It means women still have a 17% gender pay gap difference, 37% pensions gap difference. It means domestic violence affects 1 in 3 women because the politicians will not vote to put in a law, which means that men will go to prison if they choose to beat up their wives. We will never get these changes because women don't have the same number of votes as the men. Ask the G20. Can we get women top of the agenda? No, of course we can't. Because the majority of the leaders of the G20 are men.
I mean, in between us, G20 signed the outreach group, W20, so let's be nice to them.
No, I have to be nice to them. But this is the thing, we have to be nice to them. It's always the same. We have to boost the ego of men in order to get what we want. The men are the heads. We don't want to be the heads. The women are the necks, right? Behind every good man is a brilliant woman and a tired one, right? But the strength of any nation lies in its women. And women need those voting rights to be able to get through the decisions for the longevity and the sustainability of this planet. And that's why I'm pleading for that. I ask one more, because that's the public sector. And I don't believe, so I'm also passionate about women on boards. And I wanted the Women on Boards Directive to go through. But that's because I know what it brings to companies. And I know here we're talking about business also. But I would ask the private sector to report, and I know you're all going to be against me on this, but to report what the gender pay gap is in your companies. Report how many women you have on the boards. Report how many women there are in the decision-making process. And as women, sorry, here to those companies now who have consumers, 87% of purchasing power is by women. Stop buying from companies that don't put women on the boards. You have a choice. I am sorry, I have offended a lot of companies here. But if we want the change, you have to be the change you want to see.
Thank you. Great. Ayşegül, what should we write on this paragraph?
Second page, as because we filled. All right, so I'll keep it concise. I have two things. The first one is access to technology, and you would expect that. Let's talk a little bit about the future and what today holds. The future is going to be in year 2025, maybe not even then. There's going to be 50 billion connected things in the world, and probably 8 billion by then of humans who will be connected to these smart and connected stuff, whatever they are. And then the world, as you have seen in the past couple of years, is going to be so disrupted that the sectors as we know of I'll just make up things. One, the car industry, the transportation industry, the insurance industry, the civil engineering industry, the pharmaceutical industry, whatever you can think about will probably be disrupted by then. It will be disrupted by people who use technology and who find another way to either express themselves or create a service that doesn't exist today. So it's going to be a significantly different universe that we will be operating on, and not too long future. I'm talking about 5 to 10 years, which is probably nothing in the whole history of humanity that we've been living. I do want to quote Mohammed Yunus. He's been mentioned before, and he said this in a couple of G20s before, I never forget. He said that for the first time in 5,000 years, humans, he actually didn't say humans, he said youth, young people, have a tool to change the world, and that's technology. So the question's going to be, how can women turn this into an advantage for themselves to get over this classical, hierarchical, cultural, all sorts of social boundaries that we are born with every day in the societies we actually live, be it in mature or emerging or wherever in the world. Can we actually use these disruptive and amazing technologies to get ahead from what we used to be? Can we actually utilize this to be a leveling effect so that we're actually at the head of the game, although we don't belong to the right, gender, although we don't belong to the right race, if we don't belong to the right nationality, if we didn't go to the right school, if we're smart enough, know how to use the tools of today, are we going to be able to run ahead of everybody and be disruptive and be smart enough as women to get ahead? I met phenomenal women who are very young, probably in their 20s. One Turkish woman I know who just went to university and then used online technologies to gather up peasants out of southeastern Turkey who never probably worked with a woman before in their lives, got all their produce, put them on the web, and sold them to Mediterranean countries. I know another young woman who actually built up the third biggest gaming company in the world. And she's Turkish, and we're so proud of her. I talk about her everywhere I speak. So the examples are endless. So it is a matter of giving people this access and the ability and training them to think differently, think ahead, so that they're not bounded by the limits of what we are born with, is my first recommendation. And my second recommendation is a little story I listened to from Helen Clark. She's the, if you know her, former Prime Minister of New Zealand. And she ran New Zealand for 9 years. So I was chatting with her and she said, if I want to leave with you, don't forget this one. And I never have. So after she finished her tenure of 9 years as the Prime Minister of New Zealand, she visits a school. She gives a speech. It's boys and girls in the school. She finishes her speech, everybody claps. She's walking. A bunch of girls just corner her and said, hey, can we talk to you? We have a question. So they pull her aside and they go, we didn't want to ask this in front of the guys, but are you sure our country is okay being run by a man? So I guess my very simple request is have women leaders as political leaders in that thing is what I would recommend. Role models.
Great. Under the circumstances from Turkey, we will write that.
Comment.
Okay. Now, I have no idea about the timing. It's 4 already. Great. We have such valuable panelists, and you don't have a chance to ask questions, very many questions. But let me take 2 questions. But before that, we have in our www.w20turkey.org in our website, we have a survey that you can say, what you want to be written into that paragraph. It's a survey, very simple survey that you can put your input to, and please fill it out and please circulate as much as possible, so it's not a panel of 5 people, or tomorrow we have a repetition, or not Sunday we have a repetition of this, but it's not opinion leaders, but it's you, real people that are interested in this issue, voting and filling out the survey. 2 questions? Yes, ma'am. No microphone. Shout. What foundation? Pew. Okay.
You know, I want to see the voice of woman in B20 because this is my second time to attend B20, but I want to see more and more women because they are planning to employ more and more women and youth in the marketplace. But what is there as a program of excuse me, I'm French, so I'm trying as I can to speak very well the language.
No, you
so
have expressed it very well.
To accompany those women who are going to enter into the marketplace as a business leaders, what do they have as a strategy, in place for those women to become successful in what they are going to do? Some of them you have already mentioned, and I'm very, very happy to see that something is done about that. Continue to fight for that because it's a very important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. Any other question, comment? I will come back to this, but one more voice we hear. everybody agrees and everybody wants to go, huh? Yes, sir.
Adım Erkut Temiz. Türkiye Odalar Borsa Birliği Kadın Girişimciler Kurulu danışmanıyım. Ben hanımefendi çok güzel bir şey dedi. Bir basamak atlamak lazım. Bence bir basamak atlamak için önce kadınlardan değil de erkeklerden değil de kadınların kadına desteğinden yanayım ben. Çünkü bunu çok yaşadık. Türkiye Odalar Borsa Birliği'ne meclislerine girmekte erkekler hiçbir zaman destek vermedi. Daha çok Rıfat Sarcıklıoğlu başkanımız verdi. Ama kadınlar kadına destek verdiği zaman öne çıktık. Onun için de şu an 6500 tane iş kadınımız var. Türkiye Odalar Borsa Birliği camiasında. Bence kadının bir basamak çıkmasını kadın kadına destek verirse daha olur. Bunu da uluslararası şeye taşırsanız, mesela fabrika sahipleri alışverişlerini birbirinden yapsa veyahut da üretim yapanlar birbirine destek olsa bence bu daha önemli bence.
Çok
Teşekkür
teşekkürler. Our panel does not have the translation, I guess. So I'll, you have translation, but we don't have the equipment. So I will take the responsibility without pay to try to translate that for you. Gentleman is from TOP, Turkey's commerce, trade and commerce chamber, which is hosting us here right now. TOP. The biggest chamber that we have, and he's advising to women entrepreneurs in that chamber. And he says that the help to women should come from women. It's more effective, and it happens when it happens from women. We have seen that it becomes a success. That's one question, one sentence answers, and my lady over there, you have heard that, the foundation, it was actually a contribution than a big question, but still, any words about it, any of you? In a row, or?
I'm happy to take this if that's okay. I think you are spot on that women need to be sponsored by women. But I would say, and women need to be sponsored by men as well. So it's not a simple equation to just say women and women. This is an issue for society, it's an issue for business, and the outcome will be a much more prosperous future for our children and our children's children. So again, this is an issue about capitalism. This is about making money. It's about helping people have livelihood. I don't look at this issue as, oh, it's the nice thing to do, right? I look at it as, it's the competitive thing to do. So I would just say, I fully agree with what you say. I would just say, and women need to be sponsored by men as well.
Thank you. Let's go. We have planes. Maddie, one word she said, please.
Just very quickly. My name is Maddie, but Maddie stands for Make a Difference Ideas. Everything that I do has to make a difference. I believed so much in my name, I registered it as a trademark. We have what's called a commitment bead. I have bought a whole load of commitment beads, and I want each one of you to pick one up and commit, as Camilla has said, to helping another woman. Please, just help one person. Just one other woman, and I'll leave them on the table at the front. Thank you very much.
Thank you.